The sun was shining brightly over the lake, making the water glisten like a field of diamonds. It was a perfect day for a boat ride. Families, friends, and tourists were scattered across the boat, laughing, taking pictures, and enjoying the warm breeze. Among them, a young woman sat quietly near the railing, her hands resting calmly on the edge. She had been looking forward to this day, excited to spend some time relaxing and taking in the beauty of the water and the sky. She noticed the chatter of the crowd, people pointing at the scenery and snapping photos with their phones. Children ran around, excitedly peering over the edge of the boat to spot fish or ducks swimming below. The sound of the waves gently lapping against the hull mixed with laughter and the occasional call of a seagull. Everything seemed peaceful, almost idyllic. But not everyone on the boat shared the same sense of calm. A man in his 30s standing near the center was clearly looking for trouble. He had a smug expression, one that hinted at arrogance and a sense of superiority. His eyes kept glancing at the young woman, and then he started muttering under his breath, making comments loud enough for her to hear. She could feel his gaze, sharp and unwelcome, but she chose to ignore it, focusing instead on the water stretching far beyond the horizon. At first, the remarks were subtle, designed to provoke. He sneered and said things that were cruel and unnecessary, meant to make her feel out of place. Other passengers noticed the tension, but were unsure whether to step in. Some stared, frozen, unsure if it was their place to interfere. Some whispered quietly to each other, hoping the situation would not escalate. The young woman felt her pulse quicken but did not panic. She had faced difficult situations before and had learned the value of staying calm. Her eyes scanned the boat, taking note of where people were standing, the positions of the crew, and potential escape routes if things turned dangerous. She reminded herself to breathe, to remain steady and in control. The man grew bolder. He began to mimic her movements mockingly, laughing loudly, hoping to draw attention and embarrass her. His voice carried across the deck, and passengers turned their heads, curious and concerned. The children nearby paused their games, sensing that something was off. A few older passengers frowned, shaking their heads at the man's behavior, but no one stepped forward yet. Then came the first physical threat. The man leaned slightly closer, too close, and his hand brushed against her arm in what seemed like a deliberate shove. She stepped back instinctively, and the passengers around her gasped. Some murmured in shock, realizing that the situation was becoming dangerous. The man laughed, thinking he had intimidated her. But instead of showing fear, she kept her expression calm. She understood that reacting with anger or panic could make things worse. Staying composed was her best defense. She adjusted her position near the railing, subtly keeping herself between the man and the edge of the boat. She noticed that he was off balance for a moment, his feet planted unevenly on the deck. A few passengers started to whisper amongst themselves, asking if someone should alert the crew. The tension on the boat was growing, a silent energy that made the air feel heavier. The man continued to taunt her, moving closer with a smirk, trying to provoke a reaction. He pointed at the water, making gestures that suggested he wanted her to fall overboard. The young woman remained steady, her mind racing with ways to protect herself without escalating the situation further. She knew that any sudden movement could make him push harder, but she also knew that she could not remain passive forever. Around her, the boat continued to move through the sparkling water. Waves gently rocked the vessel, and the wind picked up slightly, causing the flags at the bow to flutter. Some passengers were starting to feel uncomfortable, sensing that the playful day had taken a dangerous turn. A few tried to position themselves near the young woman, hoping to provide a buffer, but the man's presence was intimidating. Despite the fear and tension, the young woman felt a sense of clarity. She could feel her heart beating faster, but it was steady, not frantic. She reminded herself to stay alert and aware of her surroundings. Every movement mattered now. She noticed the man's body language, the way his shoulders tensed, the way his eyes darted around the deck. She was learning his patterns, waiting for the right moment to act if necessary. The passengers' reactions varied. Some looked ready to intervene physically if needed, while others were frozen in shock. A few younger passengers whispered to each other, confused and scared by the situation unfolding before them. The crew, busy managing the boat, had not yet noticed the confrontation, which made the young woman realize she might have to handle this moment on her own for the time being. The man leaned closer, this time with a more threatening posture, trying to corner her against the railing. She did not flinch. Instead, she moved smoothly, subtly shifting her weight to make sure she had balance and control. She kept her eyes on him, assessing each movement carefully, ready to react if he made a more aggressive move. Passengers around the deck held their breath, sensing the intensity of the moment. It was as if time slowed for a few seconds. The sun continued to shine, the water sparkled, and yet the tension between the young woman and the man was palpable. The atmosphere had changed from casual enjoyment to something charged with anticipation and unease. The man tried one more time to intimidate her, leaning forward with a mocking laugh and a gesture that clearly suggested he wanted to push her over. She stood her ground, her mind sharp and focused. This was a test, she realized, not just of physical strength, but of composure, wit, and courage. She felt a quiet confidence building inside her, a belief that she could handle this without letting fear take control. Around her, the other passengers were starting to notice the bravery in her calm demeanor. A few whispered to each other, admiring her ability to remain composed in the face of such blatant aggression. Some silently prayed or hoped that the situation would end without harm. The children nearby clung to their parents, sensing the tension in the air, while older passengers watched intently, unsure whether to act. The young woman took a deep breath, centering herself, feeling the sun on her face and the breeze on her skin. She understood that panic or anger could make the situation worse. She reminded herself to stay steady, to use her awareness and intelligence to navigate the danger. Every second mattered. Every decision mattered. The man's aggression was obvious, but she was determined not to give him the satisfaction of seeing her afraid. The boat continued its gentle movement, rocking slightly with the waves. Passengers shifted uneasily, the earlier light-hearted mood replaced with tension and concern. The young woman remained alert, positioning herself strategically near the railing, ready to respond if necessary. She knew that the right action at the right moment could prevent a disaster. The man, sensing that his intimidation had not worked as planned, grew frustrated. His smirk faltered slightly, revealing a glimpse of uncertainty. He attempted to mock her again, but she maintained eye contact, her expression calm and unwavering. The other passengers noticed the shift in his demeanor, realizing that she was not an easy target. At this moment, the young woman felt a mix of fear and determination. Fear, because the threat was real and the situation could escalate quickly. Determination, because she knew she could rely on her wits and composure to protect herself. She had faced difficult situations before and had learned that calmness and awareness were powerful tools. The passengers continued to watch silently, sensing that something was about to happen. The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. The young woman stood ready, balanced and focused, waiting for the moment to turn the situation in her favor. She knew that the next few seconds could change everything, and in that quiet, tense moment she felt a surge of confidence. She was not just defending herself, she was asserting her dignity and strength in the face of aggression. The sun shone down, the water sparkled, and for a brief moment, time seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her next move. The boat continued to glide across the sparkling water, but the cheerful atmosphere from earlier had vanished. The passengers who were once laughing and taking photos now watched silently, their attention focused on the tension building near the railing. The young woman had not moved from her spot, but her mind was active, calculating, analyzing. She knew the man's aggression had grown stronger, and the danger was becoming more real with each passing moment. The man, growing bolder, began to circle slightly, his eyes never leaving her. He leaned against the railing nearby, pretending to laugh at some joke he had made, but his laughter was hollow, aggressive, and meant to intimidate. He muttered under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear, with words meant to humiliate. She could feel the weight of the passengers' eyes on her, sensing their concern and fear, but she refused to let them see her panic. She adjusted her stance subtly, keeping her feet firmly planted on the deck while ensuring she had space to maneuver if needed. The railing was her line of defense, her barrier between the water and the threat in front of her. She watched him carefully, noticing every twitch of his hands, the tension in his shoulders, and the way he shifted his weight. Each small detail was important. Each movement could signal a next step. The man started mocking her more openly, exaggerating every gesture she made. He repeated her words in a mocking tone and laughed loudly, drawing the attention of more passengers. Some moved closer to watch, unsure if they should intervene. Others held back, scared of what might happen if they did. Children clung to their parents, sensing that something dangerous could unfold. Despite the growing tension, the young woman remained steady, breathing slowly, focusing her mind and keeping her body ready. Then came the first overt act of aggression. He leaned too close, trying to push her toward the railing. The young woman stepped back smoothly, keeping her balance. She did not flinch or shout. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with his aggression. The passengers around her gasped at the sight, and a few murmured among themselves, unsure how to help. The boat crew were still busy attending to other passengers. Unaware of the growing conflict, the man laughed, thinking he had intimidated her, but her calm and unshaken stance seemed to frustrate him more than anything else. He tried to goad her verbally, using words meant to provoke an angry response. But she knew better than to engage with him directly in anger. She kept her voice low and even in her responses, careful not to give him the reaction he wanted. Her focus was not on winning a verbal battle, but on staying safe and looking for the right moment to act if necessary. Passengers around the boat began to notice the tension. Some whispered to each other, expressing their concern. A few tried to position themselves near her, offering subtle protection. Others just watched in awe at how composed she was under pressure. The man's actions were becoming increasingly unpredictable, and people could see the danger growing. It was clear to everyone that she was dealing with someone who intended to cause harm. Yet she moved and thought with precision, not fear. The young woman realized that the key to handling this situation was awareness. She scanned the boat, noting the positions of people, the crew, and potential obstacles. She observed the man's posture, the rhythm of his movements, and how he reacted to her every action. She remained grounded, refusing to give in to fear or panic. She knew that any hasty action could escalate the situation, but every moment of patience was a chance to maintain control. The man, growing impatient, took another step closer, trying to corner her against the railing. His smirk had faded into something sharper, more threatening. The passengers around them held their breath, sensing that the confrontation might become physical. The young woman's calm expression, however, seemed to give her an advantage. She was not just standing there. She was thinking, calculating, planning her next move even as the danger increased. She shifted slightly to the side, keeping herself balanced and away from the immediate threat of being pushed overboard. Her hands rested lightly on the railing, ready to catch herself if needed. She was fully aware of the water, the edge of the boat, and the man's proximity. Her mind worked fast, imagining different scenarios and how she could respond to each one. Her goal was not to fight him with force, but to use her presence and awareness to keep herself safe. The passengers could sense a shift in the man's behavior. His confidence seemed to waver slightly. The young woman's calm and steady demeanor made him uncertain. He tried again to provoke her verbally, using louder insults and mocking gestures, but she remained composed. Her steady gaze and calm breathing gave her a quiet power that drew the attention and admiration of those around her. The man, frustrated, reached out aggressively, trying to grab her arm. She quickly moved her hand, avoiding his grasp while keeping her balance. The passengers around them gasped again, some stepping slightly closer to provide a buffer. Children clutched their parents, sensing the tension. The boat rocked gently with the waves, adding an extra layer of challenge to maintaining stability. But she stayed steady. She realized that the moment required both physical and mental awareness. Every small movement mattered. Every shift in weight, every glance, every step was part of a careful calculation. She stayed alert, scanning the boat and the passengers, knowing that someone might step in at any moment. She also knew that if she acted too quickly or aggressively, it could make the situation worse. Patience and composure were her allies. The man, sensing that his intimidation tactics were failing, became more aggressive. He leaned forward, his voice rising, his gestures becoming more exaggerated and threatening. The young woman did not flinch. She did not respond in anger. Instead, she focused on maintaining her balance, watching his every movement, ready to act if necessary. Her calmness seemed to unsettle him further, and the passengers noticed the subtle shift in power. A few passengers began to murmur quietly among themselves, admiring her ability to remain composed under pressure. Some thought about intervening, unsure if it was their place to do so. Others were frozen, captivated by the tension and unsure what to expect next. The young woman, despite the fear she naturally felt, projected confidence and calmness, which in turn influenced the mood of those around her. The man attempted one more physical move, reaching out as if to push her again. She shifted her weight, leaning slightly to the side, avoiding his reach while maintaining her balance. Her eyes never left his, her expression steady and controlled. The passengers watched, amazed at her ability to remain composed in such a dangerous situation. Even the man seemed uncertain now, his smirk gone, replaced by frustration and confusion. The young woman felt a surge of determination. She had faced threats before, but this was different. This was public in front of many witnesses, and it required a balance of courage, awareness, and intelligence. She reminded herself to stay calm, to breathe, and to think strategically. Every moment she remained steady was a moment of power. Every careful movement was a step toward controlling the situation without letting fear dictate her actions. The boat continued its gentle journey across the lake, the sun shining, the water sparkling, and the passengers watching silently. The tension remained high, but the young woman's composure never wavered. She was ready for whatever the man might do next, and she knew that her awareness and calmness were her greatest strengths in that moment. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation, and everyone on the boat sensed that something remarkable was unfolding right before their eyes. The tension on the boat had reached a point where everyone on deck felt the weight of it. The young woman remained near the railing, her hands lightly gripping it, but her mind was racing. She knew the man would try something more aggressive soon, and she needed to be ready. She took a deep breath, feeling the sun on her face and the gentle wind against her skin, grounding herself in the moment. She focused on staying calm, knowing that panic could make even the simplest move dangerous. The man, frustrated that his previous attempts had failed, became bolder. He took a few steps closer, circling slowly as if trying to intimidate her from every angle. His eyes were sharp, his voice loud, and he continued to mock her, repeating her words in exaggerated tones. The passengers held their breath, unsure whether to intervene. Children clung to their parents, sensing that the situation was becoming serious. The boat crew remained busy, unaware of the confrontation escalating near the railing. The young woman's mind was active, calculating her options carefully. She knew she had to protect herself without escalating the conflict. She observed the man's movements, his stance, and the tension in his muscles. She noted his balance, his gestures, and the way he reacted to her calm demeanor. Every detail mattered. She shifted slightly to the side, keeping herself ready to move or act, all while appearing composed and unafraid. Suddenly, the man lunged, trying to push her toward the edge. She stepped back smoothly, using the railing for support and keeping her balance. Passengers gasped and murmured, sensing the danger. The man laughed, thinking he had intimidated her, but she remained steady. Her calmness in the face of aggression surprised everyone around her. Even those who had been hesitant to get involved noticed her control and focus. Realizing that sheer intimidation would not work, the man tried a more physical approach. He leaned aggressively, attempting to corner her against the railing. The young woman adjusted her position, maintaining her balance and keeping herself a safe distance from the edge. She did not panic or flinch. Instead, she assessed the situation, calculating the best way to neutralize the threat without giving in to fear. The passengers watched in awe as she subtly shifted her weight, ready to respond to any sudden move. She kept her eyes on the man, reading his intentions and predicting his next action. The boat rocked gently with the waves, adding an extra layer of challenge, but she remained steady. Her presence of mind was remarkable, showing a level of awareness and composure that drew the attention of everyone nearby. The man became increasingly frustrated. His gestures grew exaggerated, his voice louder, but the young woman's calm demeanor did not falter. She understood that the next few moments were crucial. She needed to act in a way that would protect herself and diffuse the situation, but without resorting to aggression unless absolutely necessary. Her movements were precise, controlled, and deliberate, giving her the advantage in the standoff. As he reached out again, she made her move. With a quick, subtle shift of her weight and a well-timed step, she avoided his grasp while causing him to lose his balance slightly. He stumbled forward, his arms flailing briefly as he tried to regain control. The passengers gasped, some instinctively moving closer to create space between the two. The boat rocked gently, but she maintained her balance, standing firm and composed. The man's confusion and frustration were evident. He had underestimated her, expecting fear or anger, but instead found calm intelligence and awareness. The young woman's steady gaze met his, showing confidence and control. Her actions were not aggressive but strategic, demonstrating that she could handle the situation without losing her composure. The passengers began to whisper among themselves, impressed by her courage and poise. Realizing that physical intimidation was failing, the man tried to regain some control verbally. He shouted and mocked, hoping to provoke a reaction, but the young woman remained calm, responding with measured words when necessary, not giving him the emotional response he sought. Her calm voice contrasted with his aggressive shouts, highlighting the imbalance of power. Passengers began to take notice, some feeling inspired by her ability to stay composed under pressure. She continued to move subtly, keeping herself balanced and ready. Every small motion was deliberate, ensuring she could respond to any sudden move from him. She maintained awareness of the passengers around her, noting who might step in and who was observing in fear or curiosity. Her mind worked quickly, calculating the best way to neutralize the threat while maintaining safety. The man, growing increasingly frustrated and unsure, attempted another aggressive move. He lunged forward, reaching toward her with both hands. She stepped aside smoothly, redirecting his momentum slightly, causing him to stumble and lose balance. The passengers gasped again, some holding their hands to their mouths in shock. The man's smirk was gone, replaced by confusion and frustration. The young woman had outmaneuvered him without physical confrontation, using awareness and strategy rather than force. The shift in power was noticeable. The man's confidence waned as he realized that his attempts to intimidate her had failed. The young woman stood calm, balanced, and alert, her presence commanding attention. Passengers whispered quietly among themselves, admiring her ability to remain composed and in control. Even those who had been hesitant to intervene recognized the intelligence and courage she displayed. The young woman knew that the next moments were crucial. She remained near the railing, ready to move if necessary, but her focus was also on maintaining psychological control. By staying calm and composed, she had already shifted the balance of power. The man's aggression had been neutralized, not through force but through awareness, intelligence, and confidence. The boat continued its gentle movement across the lake, the sun shining, the water sparkling. The passengers remained attentive, sensing the tension but also recognizing the young woman's remarkable composure. She had turned a dangerous situation into a display of calm strength, showing that courage and awareness could be more powerful than aggression. As the man stood there, unsure of his next move, the young woman remained steady. She knew that patience and observation were her allies. Every step she had taken, every shift of weight, every calculated glance had brought her closer to control. The passengers watched silently, impressed and inspired by the calm intelligence and courage she displayed. The moment had become a turning point, showing that fear could be overcome through composure, awareness, and strategic thinking. The man's confidence had faltered. He stood near the railing, looking frustrated and uncertain, while the young woman remained calm, balanced, and in complete control of her movements. Passengers watched silently, some holding their breaths, others exchanging whispers of admiration. The tension that had filled the boat moments ago was now shifting. The power dynamic had changed, and it was clear that she was no longer a passive target. She had outmaneuvered him not through force but through strategy and composure. She took a steady breath, feeling the wind on her face and the warmth of the sun on her skin. Every muscle in her body was relaxed but ready, her mind focused. She knew that one wrong move could reignite the danger, so she maintained a careful awareness of her surroundings. The railing under her hands was steady, the gentle rocking of the boat under her feet was predictable, and the position of the other passengers was clear in her mind. She felt the balance between herself and the man near the railing, knowing she had to maintain it. The man tried once more to intimidate her, moving aggressively and shouting, but his words no longer had power. Her calmness and steady presence were disarming him. Passengers began to notice the change, whispering quietly among themselves. Some were inspired by her bravery, others relieved that the danger was lessening. Children clung to their parents, sensing that the threat was no longer immediate. The boat crew, finally noticing the tension, started moving toward the situation. But the young woman did not rely on their intervention. She was fully capable of handling it herself. She decided it was time to address the man directly, not with aggression but with a quiet firmness that stunned everyone watching. Her voice was calm, measured, and full of authority. She pointed out the absurdity of his actions, describing how his behavior had been inappropriate and dangerous. She did this without anger, without yelling, without giving him the emotional reaction he had been hoping to provoke. Her words were precise, and her tone commanded attention. Everyone on the boat listened intently, sensing the shift in control. The man's face registered surprise and embarrassment. He had expected fear, anger, or some other reaction that he could use to assert dominance, but instead, he faced calm reasoning and quiet authority. The passengers could feel the change in the atmosphere. What had begun as a threatening confrontation was now a moment of control and dignity. The young woman's composure was not only protecting herself but also teaching a lesson to everyone present about courage and poise. The man tried to recover his arrogance, attempting another mocking gesture, but it had lost all impact. She maintained eye contact, her steady gaze unflinching, making it clear that she was no longer a target but a person in control of the situation. Passengers started murmuring among themselves, some nodding in approval, others expressing relief that the confrontation had not escalated further. The young woman's calm intelligence had completely neutralized the threat, and everyone could see it. She then subtly adjusted her position, keeping the man off balance without using force. She used the railing and the gentle rocking of the boat to her advantage, making it difficult for him to approach her again. Her movements were graceful and controlled, showing that she could respond effectively if needed but preferred to maintain composure. Her strategic approach drew admiration from the passengers, who realized that true strength was not in aggression, but in awareness, control, and patience. The man, growing more frustrated and embarrassed, finally seemed to recognize that his attempts to intimidate her had failed completely. His posture slumped slightly, and his voice lost some of its earlier aggression. He began to retreat mentally, unsure of how to respond to someone who would not react as expected. The young woman maintained her calm, continuing to stand tall and balanced, demonstrating that she held the power in the situation. Passengers began to show subtle signs of support. Some moved slightly closer to the young woman, forming a gentle buffer between her and the man, but she did not need their help. Her presence was commanding, and her calm demeanor had made it clear to everyone that she was in control. Even the children who had been watching were beginning to feel safer. Sensing the authority and strength she radiated, she spoke once more, her words calm but pointed, highlighting the inappropriate and dangerous behavior of the man. Her voice carried across the deck and all passengers could hear. The man's embarrassment deepened as her words exposed his actions, and it became clear to everyone that he had lost control. He muttered something under his breath, clearly trying to regain composure, but it was too late. The moment had passed, and the young woman had emerged as the person in control. The boat crew finally reached the area and began to intervene, but the confrontation had already been resolved. The man was subdued not through physical force but through awareness, composure, and strategic thinking. Passengers began to relax, some applauding quietly, others expressing admiration for the young woman's courage. The children smiled, feeling reassured, and the atmosphere on the boat began to return to a sense of calm and safety. The young woman remained calm, taking deep breaths and maintaining her balance. She knew that the danger had passed but remained aware of her surroundings, ensuring that she remained in control until the situation was fully resolved. The passengers continued to watch her with admiration, understanding that true bravery was not about aggression but about composure, intelligence, and strategic thinking. As the boat continued its gentle journey across the sparkling lake, the young woman's calm and commanding presence left a lasting impression. Passengers who had witnessed the confrontation whispered among themselves, inspired by her ability to handle a threatening situation with dignity and control. The man, now subdued and embarrassed, no longer posed a threat, and the young woman's calmness had turned a potentially dangerous moment into a lesson in courage and presence of mind. Her actions had not only protected herself, but had also influenced everyone around her. Passengers were inspired to recognize the importance of calmness, awareness, and strategic thinking in the face of danger. Children who had been frightened learned that courage could be quiet and controlled, not loud or aggressive. The young woman's bravery became the story of the day, showing that intelligence, calm, and composure could triumph over aggression and intimidation. The air on the boat gradually began to lighten as the confrontation had fully subsided. The man who had once been aggressive and threatening now stood quietly, a mix of embarrassment and confusion on his face. The young woman remained calm, her composure never faltering, aware that the situation was not over until everyone felt safe. She stood near the railing, letting the gentle movement of the boat help her remain balanced, while keeping an attentive eye on the man to ensure he did not make any further sudden moves. Passengers who had witnessed the earlier tension began to relax. Whispers of admiration spread across the deck. People began talking quietly among themselves about the bravery and intelligence she had displayed. Some passengers approached her, offering words of support and reassurance. Many expressed astonishment at her ability to handle the situation with such calm and dignity. Children who had been frightened earlier began to smile and laugh again, feeling reassured by the presence of someone who had shown strength without aggression. The boat crew, now fully aware of what had occurred, approached the young woman to ensure she was safe and to manage the man who had caused the disturbance. They thanked her quietly for maintaining her composure, acknowledging that her presence of mind had prevented the situation from escalating further. She nodded politely, grateful that the danger had been neutralized, but she did not boast or make a spectacle of her actions. She simply remained calm and collected, understanding that her courage had already spoken volumes. The man who had caused the tension now faced the reality of his actions. He muttered apologies, though they seemed hollow and self-serving. His friends, if he had any, looked embarrassed, and some passengers openly expressed disapproval. The young woman's steady presence had exposed his behavior for what it truly was: aggressive, inappropriate, and cowardly. The man had hoped to provoke fear or anger, but instead he had been met with calm intelligence and quiet authority. As the boat continued to move across the lake, the young woman reflected on what had happened. She understood that courage was not always about physical strength or loud confrontation. Sometimes it was about composure, awareness, and strategic thinking. She had been able to handle the threat because she had remained calm, observed the situation carefully, and made deliberate choices. Her mind had been clear, and she had not let fear or anger dictate her actions. Passengers continued to observe her, inspired by her actions. Some quietly remarked to each other how impressive it was that she had handled a potentially dangerous situation without escalating it. Others noted that her bravery had created a sense of safety for everyone on the boat. Even those who had initially been unsure about how to respond felt reassured that the situation had been resolved without violence. The young woman's calm had become a model for courage, showing that presence of mind and intelligence could neutralize aggression effectively. She remained aware of her surroundings, ensuring the man posed no further threat. The crew had intervened subtly, guiding him away from the main area and speaking to him firmly. Passengers shifted slightly, giving space but remaining watchful. The young woman's awareness had never wavered, and she remained poised and balanced. Her actions had shown that she could protect herself and others without needing to resort to physical confrontation. The atmosphere on the boat began to return to normal. Children ran around, laughing and playing, while adults resumed taking in the scenery and enjoying the ride. Some passengers came over to express their admiration once more, thanking her quietly and noting how impressive it was that she had remained calm in such a stressful moment. She accepted their compliments with a polite nod and a gentle smile, not seeking attention but quietly proud of how she had handled the situation. As the boat approached the dock, the man who had caused the disturbance was escorted off, clearly aware that his actions were unacceptable. Passengers watched as he was removed, feeling a sense of relief. The young woman remained on deck, standing tall and composed, having emerged from a dangerous and tense situation unscathed. Her calm and strategic approach had not only protected her, but had also reassured everyone else, transforming a moment of fear into one of admiration and respect. Passengers continued to discuss what had happened, praising the young woman for her intelligence and courage. Some talked about how they had learned from her example, realizing that composure and awareness were powerful tools in dealing with aggression. Children who had witnessed the event learned that bravery could be quiet and controlled, not loud or violent. Her actions had created a ripple effect, inspiring those around her to recognize the value of calmness and presence of mind. The young woman herself felt a quiet satisfaction, She knew that courage was not about seeking recognition or confrontation, but about making deliberate choices in the moment, staying aware, and protecting oneself with intelligence and poise. She had done exactly that. The day that had started with tension and fear had turned into a lesson for everyone on board, a moment that would be remembered for its display of calm strength and strategic thinking. As passengers disembarked from the boat, many thanked her once more. Some mentioned that her actions had inspired them to consider how they might respond in a similar situation. The young woman accepted their words with humility, understanding that the true lesson was not about her but about the power of composure and awareness. The lake glistened in the sunlight. The boat's gentle rocking ceased, and the day continued with a sense of peace restored. In the hours and days that followed, the story of what had happened on the boat spread quietly among the passengers and their friends. People shared their admiration for the young woman, noting how she had handled a threatening situation with intelligence, calmness, and courage. Her actions became a quiet inspiration, showing that bravery did not always need to be loud or aggressive. Instead, presence of mind, strategic thinking, and composure could turn a dangerous moment into one of respect and dignity. The young woman continued with her life, carrying the experience as a reminder of her own strength. She understood that courage was a choice made in the moment, a choice to remain calm, aware, and deliberate even in the face of danger. The lessons she had demonstrated on that boat, patience, awareness, and strategic thinking, remained with her, quietly shaping how she approached challenges in the future. For the passengers, the memory of that day stayed with them as well. They had witnessed a person confronting aggression with intelligence and composure, and it left a lasting impression. Many thought about the importance of staying calm in tense situations, of observing carefully before acting, and of maintaining dignity even when faced with disrespect or threat. The young woman's bravery had transformed a frightening moment into a powerful lesson for everyone present. By the end of the day, the lake glimmered in the setting sun, and the boat was docked safely. Passengers went their separate ways, carrying the memory of a young woman's courage with them. The man who had caused the disturbance had been removed, and the lesson he had received was clear. Aggression and intimidation were no match for awareness, calmness, and intelligence. The young woman, calm and composed, left the boat with her head held high. She had faced danger, protected herself, and demonstrated courage in its truest form. Her story was not about confrontation or aggression, but about the quiet power of presence, the strength of composure, and the intelligence of strategic thinking. It was a story that would stay with everyone who had witnessed it, a lesson in bravery and dignity that would not be forgotten.